God bless everybody today. It's February 1st of 2021, and this is a extension to the paradigm that I have talked about the three modern day kings. And there was a paradigm about Revlin and how he's going to be taken away, and how a terrible event is going to happen to him. But there's also an event that potentially could happen to Netanyahu, I believe, in this same paradigm. And so there's an overlaying of an additional prophecy on top of what I've already given you, and I want to sort of show you that. You can always find all my articles on my eschatology page at End of Days Survival, endofdayssurvival.com. I have been adding additional files to the page. I've added the additional prophecy or paradigm videos and information. This video is an extension off of this video here, the paradigm of the three modern day kings or leaders, Revlin, Netanyahu, and Erdogan, and how this video was about this paradigm of mainly Revlin and what's going to affect him and potentially his family. This paradigm, or part of this prophecy, will actually affect Netanyahu. And I wanted to break this off because I wanted you to be able to see how it layers into this and how it might affect Netanyahu at the end. But I wanted to show you what was going to happen to Revlin, and then what's going to happen to Netanyahu, and then how Erdogan's going to affect the whole situation as we move forward into the future here. So I'm just going to cover a little bit on where we were in the past video and how I've gotten to where I am on this. And I don't know if this is right. I'm just saying this lines up extremely well, and it's something that we should look at, have a conversation about. It seems to be right. It depends on whether Netanyahu is elected as the new president of Israel on March 24th of 2021. If Netanyahu is not elected and becomes the president of Israel, then this prophecy is wrong. This paradigm is wrong. And I've said that in the last video. I don't know whether this is right, but it's possible, and it could be extremely right. I think it's something that we should have a conversation about. So I went into quite a bit of detail about how Revlin and Netanyahu and Erdogan could potentially affect us in the last 6 to 7 years here, and how, based on the amount of time that they've been in power or been in leadership capacity, they mimic the times that a number of books give us, like Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, and Psalm 90:10 is part of this. There's a number of things that they mimic into, and so when you start looking at this stuff, you go, we really need to look at this because maybe these are time and date stamps. And so if you look at Revlin and how long he's been in office, he became the president of Israel in 2014, and he will be one-term president, okay? And so he'll leave in 2021, and I believe, based on this paradigm, this prophecy, that Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, which is Jehoiakim, will be the next president of Israel, and that will happen on March 24th of 2021. And if that doesn't happen, then this paradigm is wrong and it doesn't work, and so I'll just admit that it's wrong. But it could happen. And if it does happen, and as we move forward, it could be extremely accurate in the dates that it's giving us. So I wanted to overlay this, and it's something we need to look at as we move forward. So Netanyahu could be the next president in 2021, and that would then carry us forward into the next 6 or 7 years. And then you have Nebuchadnezzar, which I believe is Erdogan, and that Erdogan has been in power basically since 2002 when he became the prime minister. He was elected in, actually became the prime minister in 2003 to 2014, and then he became the president in 2014. I believe he'll remain in power. So how does Netanyahu play in this picture? So the last layering is that Netanyahu is basically captured when Israel and Jerusalem is besieged. Okay, and so as you walk through this prophecy, and you've got to watch the other videos or you're not going to understand how this layers in. But if you look at the time date stamps of these verses, you'll realize there's a pattern of dates that occur and that they follow along with the amount of time that these leaders have actually been in office. But the last video we talked about how Revlin is going to be affected. I've added in what I believe is the last part of the prophecy in the paradigm, and that is this. On October 10th of 2023, when Gog or Erdogan is besieging Jerusalem, as stated in all these verses. Now, Joel 2 is attack of Gog on Jerusalem and Israel. That's why it's here. But this verse, and this verse all indicate the 10th month of the 10th day of this year, which would be the 9th year of this king, Revlin. Okay, so 23. And that Israel would be besieged. Okay, and Jerusalem would be besieged. And that Netanyahu potentially will be captured and taken away to Babylon. And I've said for a while, Mystery Babylon is in Turkey, okay? I've said for a while it's the seat of Satan. It's going to be rebuilt along with the temple in the last 3.5 years when Antichrist is on the ground, and that all radiates around Turkey or the seat of Satan, just as there is a duality between Jesus and his bride, there's a duality between Satan and his bride, and I believe that that is Pergamus, Turkey. It tells us in the second letter that he writes to that church, warns them that he's going to have a judgment with his two-edged sword against them. If you look at the fifth bowl, you'll realize that that judgment is the fifth bowl, and that will go against Mystery Babylon. And I did articles about this and done videos about why I believe Mystery Babylon is Pergamus, Turkey. You can go look at that if you want to see why I came to that conclusion. So, as he's given us these date stamps, you go into these kings, you realize that he gives us one more date stamp that we should look at, and it affects Netanyahu. And it says that Netanyahu will be captured and taken away to Babylon or Shinar, and which is in Turkey in this case. And that's another thing, a lot of people believe that Shinar is where the Tower of Babel was, and they can some people can trace that back around Turkey, or the south part of Turkey. So they don't really know. That's a discussion that's open right now, but a lot of people seem to trace it back to that southern portion of Turkey. And so if Mystery Babylon is in Turkey, and I believe it is, then that makes sense. And so it also indicates that, and so let's look at this first verse. So Netanyahu is captured and taken away to Babylon, okay, on this date. And that's what I keep saying, is you got to look at these date stamps. And this is indicated in Daniel 1 and 2. So if we go to Daniel 1 and 2, it says this, and this is why I think this is important. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, or Israel, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, of Jerusalem, and besieged it. So this is saying the same thing it was in the other verses that I was just showing you. So if we go back and look at these verses, and I'm not going to go into them, you'll notice that on October 10th of 2023, Erdogan is besieging Jerusalem in Israel. So it's saying the same thing as Daniel 1 and 2 is. Okay, let's go back and look at that. And so see, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, is besieging Jerusalem. So it's saying the same thing, and this is the 3rd year of Jehoiakim. So if we want to go back and look at that, that would be in 2023, 2024, and that's when Israel's being besieged based on this prophecy I'm talking about, because this would be the 3rd year. So if he comes in 2021, you got 2022, 2023, you're into 2024, would be the 3rd year. Okay, so if that's the case, then that would fit in line with here. And so possibly Netanyahu would be captured and taken away to Babylon, as Daniel 1 and 2, Daniel 1 and 2 indicate. So it indicates that in the 3rd year of Netanyahu, or Jehoiakim, which would be from 2021 to 2024, you have the attack in 2023, this is to 2024, this is the 3rd year, or it'd be the 3rd year of this king, or this president, that Israel and Jerusalem is being besieged, and that he would give, the Lord would give this king of Israel into the hand of this king, Nebuchadnezzar, or in this case, Erdogan, and that he would carry away some parts of his, of the house of God, and that he would carry them away into the land of Shinar, which is in Babylon, or where the Tower of Babel was, and that he would take those treasures into his land, and I say that's Turkey. And so I think it's an interesting thing to think that when Erdogan actually gets to Jerusalem and besieges it, that this king Netanyahu, that's in power potentially if he gets elected in March, would then be taken captive in October 10th of 2023, or around that date that it gives us. And that it says something else extremely important here. And then if you come back here and you look at this, so if Netanyahu's taken away into Babylon, it tells us that he's going to be removed. Okay, he's not killed, he's taken away, he's captured, he's taken into Turkey or Babylon, and that I believe that he will be then in captivity for 3 years, and then will come against Antichrist in some form. It doesn't really give us too much on the information of how he rebels, but he says that he will be in captivity for 3 years and then will rebel against Antichrist. And so by the end of 26 to the beginning of 2027, we could potentially see Antichrist go against, Netanyahu go against Antichrist. And this is indicated in 2 Kings 24, verse 1. So it indicates that in the day of Nebuchadnezzar, when he comes against Jehoiakim, he then becomes his servant for 3 years, and that then he will rebel against him. And so if he's captured in 2023, at the end of 2023, and then he's in captivity for 3 years before he rebels, that would be at the end of 26, but potentially 2027. So I think it's important that we look at that. And then I added this to the chart that I built to show you how this all fits in. So we come back to this. Daniel was originally a Daniel 8, Daniel 12, and Psalm 9. So we're going to bring you back to this chart. It's adjusted a lot since we first started looking at this chart. We're bringing you back into this area here so that you can see how Netanyahu would fit into this chart itself. And so I'll zoom in on that real quick. So if we zoom into the chart and we get into that October 10th, 2023 date, when Erdogan or Gog is besieging Jerusalem, as indicated in these verses, that Netanyahu on this date would be captured and taken into Babylon, as Daniel 1 through 2 verse says, and that he would be taken away captivity for 3 years, and then at the end of the 3 years, in some capacity, would rebel against Antichrist around the end of 26 to the beginning of 2027, as 2 Kings 24:1 indicates. And that, I indicated that shortly after they start that siege on Jerusalem, that we would see him give the 10 nations the power for 1 hour, and then they would die. So if Netanyahu is captured here, then he's taken away and removed from the situation before these nations are actually destroyed. And then he would affect this as we move down this chart. So if he's effectively captured around this date in here, and he's in captivity for up to 3 years around the end of 26, sometime in here through 27, he would then gain the capacity to then rebel or do something against Antichrist. And I think it's interesting because if you come into here and look at this part, that just prior to this, Netanyahu's son has proclaimed that fast, and that then Jerusalem is smitten by or utterly destroyed by Antichrist. Okay, and so that would fall in line around the end of 26 to sometime into 27. This potentially could happen. And so God then places lamentation against Egypt, and all of Egypt's destroyed. So he's, getting into that cycle of, going into abomination here. And so after 3 years, then Netanyahu have some ability, after being in captivity, to go against Antichrist before abomination. It seems to say that based on what I'm showing you here. So it just sort of fits in place, and it's amazing if that is the case, because then it adds an additional event or, you know, layering to this chart based on what it's telling us. And so in that third year of Netanyahu, which would be in 2023, we would start to see him go into that third year, that he would be captured, and that he would then be held in Babylon or Turkey for up to 3 years before he would then be able to actually do anything. That would take us to about here in the chart. And so I think it's just an interesting layer to this. And you can go look at those verses and see how that all plays a part. But is this a paradigm where Netanyahu will be a factor? And if so, maybe that's why his son down here is a factor. And maybe that's why Revlin is a major factor until 2025, when he's captured and taken away, because Netanyahu maybe is not in the position until sometime down here. You know, if he's captured here, if Netanyahu's captured here, and he's not in a position to do anything till here, then what would happen in this country as they're under siege? Revlin would step up to the plate, and probably the sons of Netanyahu, because of the condition of the country and Jerusalem and everything, they would have to step up to the plate. And so I would guess that these people would affect the timeline through here, and that hopefully, or I guess, you know, based on this, you know, him coming out and rebelling against Antichrist at the end, around this time, Netanyahu would be a factor again. But it's amazing that neither Revlin is killed. He's taken away to Babylon, and his eyes are taken out, and his sons are killed. And then he's placed in captivity, but never killed. That Netanyahu is never, as far as I can tell, killed either. And that if you look at the timing, it's interesting. As they break into those walls in Jerusalem, and you see that famine, they take Revlin away, and then they have that 2-year window between the time they take Revlin away, they besiege and get into Jerusalem, an abomination. They have the 2 years to rebuild that third temple, that Netanyahu's going to play a factor at the end here. And I said for a while, for us to get the Lord back, and there's a process. You know, everybody seems to not understand the process, and maybe I don't understand the process. But think about the process. So Netanyahu is out now, and he's rebelling against the Antichrist. The Antichrist has now destroyed Egypt. It's basically destroyed most of Israel and Jerusalem, and now he's proclaiming himself to be God of gods, and now he's overcome the two witnesses. And we get to that seventh trumpet when the Lord comes back. I've talked about this for a while. And so the 69th trumpet was sounded in 70 AD, when the second temple was destroyed. That was the last time the trumpet was sounded in that temple. Okay, it was destroyed, so they couldn't resound it in the 70th time in the temple, because the temple's no longer in existence. And so that's why I was concerned about that Jeremiah warning when they blew the shofar on Rosh Hashanah last year, that this was going to send the king of the north against them, and this was a judgment against them. And I did like 3 videos on that. You can go look at those. I said for a while this was going to unleash a terrible judgment against Israel. Joel 1, the plagues are going to start here in the next year or so, and then we're going to see Gog in there by 2023. And so he's going to be attacking them. And so they've unleashed this judgment against them. And that's why that Jeremiah warning was so important. Um, but in this case, we're going to see Gog attack them. And when they go from Daniel 8 and they've destroyed Iran, and they then go down into Israel and start to attack Israel and Jerusalem as they get into Egypt, we're going to see potentially Netanyahu captured. And so I think that's extremely important. And then would he then come here, um, you know, somehow get away from Antichrist, come against him, and then, like I say, when we get into that temple, everybody thinks I'm crazy when I say these things. That last blowing of that trumpet has to occur inside the temple, okay? And so for the Lord to come back on the seventh trumpet, I believe it has to happen. Someone has to be in the temple. They have to blow the shofar in the temple to bring the Lord back. And as Antichrist is going off here, okay, and killing everything till the time the Lord comes back and raptures everybody away from great tribulation, okay, we're not here after the seventh trumpet happens, so we're not into the wrath phase here. But we are here into great tribulation. And if you can make it to the 1335 days to the end of this and the Lord comes back, then you're pretty blessed and you're going to get special rewards. So I think it's important, though, that we understand that when abomination occurs and he desecrates the temple, that to bring the Lord back, we have to have someone in the temple with a shofar blowing in the temple itself, and that this would happen on a sabbatical day, October 2nd. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. There's a process here. And so when that shofar blows, and think about that, if all this is happening and Antichrist is going off at that time, and we've got to get somebody in the temple, depending on, I know it sounds like a movie, but it's possible. I mean, think about what's going on here. It's all crazy at this point. It's all like surreal in a movie, okay? And so if we got to get somebody in the temple and blow the shofar in the temple to bring the Lord back, it could be a process to get somebody in there to just do that. But if that's what it takes to get the Lord back, then I guess that's the process. But I just thought it was something interesting, and I've said this for a while, that it will be blown the 70th trumpet, the 70th week, the ending of Daniel's 70th week. That last shofar has to be blown in the temple. I could be totally wrong, but that's what I believe will need to happen to make this story final, get us into the wrath phase, have us or the people from great tribulation removed here, and then we can get into that millennial era once they drop the bowls down. So I just think it's important. Does Netanyahu get captured here? Does he rebel against Antichrist here? Is there anything to any of this paradigm? I do not know. It lines up extremely well and fits in with the original charts and everything that I did. And now we're bringing in multiple prophets with very specific time stamps. There's multiple prophets talking about the besieging of Jerusalem on a very specific time, and that these events are going to happen. So when we look at these kings, and that's why I keep talking about these three modern day kings. So as we move forward into the near future here. I mean, we're into February already, and so as we get into these 2300 days, mornings and nights of Daniel, and we start walking into that potential ram-goat war, we're going to start walking into those areas where we potentially are going to be affected by that attack on Jerusalem. And so are these things going to happen? I don't know. There are things that we need to look at. Potentially, if we see a couple things happen in the near future, we could potentially see this paradigm actually occur with all these different working parts. And so to finalize this video and this paradigm, I believe, and there's a lot more to the paradigm, I think, if we get into it, break it down. This is a fairly new concept, something I've been looking at, something I think we need to look at, sort of see what happens with Erdogan. But two things have to occur. Benjamin Netanyahu has to become the president of Israel on May 24th of 2021. If he doesn't, or somebody else becomes the president, then this paradigm's just wrong, and I'll be the first one to admit I'm wrong. And that Erdogan has to maintain his power or his presence in Turkey in this next election cycle, and that's going to be, I believe, in 2021. So we're going to sort of see that happen. Now, after that, we see Daniel 8 occur. Okay, that's about the best I can do, and that's around the end of this year. And I believe that's when the Kurds will be pushed down into Iran, and that we will then see Turkey go over and crush them around the end of this year. I thought around fall, but I can't give you very specific dates. All I can do is go back to this chart, and I take you back to this chart, and if it falls within the Psalm 90:10, fourscore, or is the strong generation of Israel, which would be May 14th of 2028, and that all things have to happen before the strong generation perishes, that it all has to happen before that time, and so we need to look at what happens before that. What happens before that strong generation perishes, okay? And that's why this is important. Is this stuff all lining up? Does it work from the past to the future? Is it coming up? Can we give people a roadmap and potentially hope at the end? And, this is going to get bleak. All this is going to get terrible. People don't realize how bad this is going to get, okay? So I keep on trying to underscore this. This is going to start to really, really break down. You got a quarter of the world under war. You have, potentially 4 trumpets going off and devastating a third of the planet. You have massive destruction, devastation, famine, plagues, all kinds of stuff hitting the world all at the same time. And this is not just a regional thing. This is going to affect everybody. A 6, seal earthquake is going to happen. And then you're going to then, as you somehow get through all that, you're going to see an antichrist come out. And who knows who's in war elsewhere, but that's just what we know is going on in the Middle East and affecting the world at this time. So you need to understand that it's going to be bleak, and so when Antichrist takes those continual burnt offerings away and then signs that covenant of death, he's going to say, that's the big reset right there. That's the big reset. When that happens, he's going to take all the pain away and say, look, man, just sign on the dotted line. I'll take all your pain away. But you got to join me, and you can't do that. So that's why it's important. Get your oil in your lamp. Find that open door, and that's Jesus Christ. And time's short, people. Based on this chart, time's extremely short. But maybe we have a window into what's coming. It'd be nice to have some kind of a roadmap, wouldn't it? I'm not going to give you false hope here. I don't know, but we'll see. God bless everybody.